First and foremost, all esteem to the Most High. His true set apart name is YAHUAH. That means the self-existent or the eternal one in our original Abri, or what people call Hebrew language. Also, shalom to those who are taking the time to take this lesson in. I'm one of the children of the Most High, and this lesson is titled, Can I Get a Witness or Two? We're going to be calling wisdom and understanding to the stand. Now, this is part of a series I've been working on called the I-820 series, or the Isaiah chapter 8 verse 20 series, where I've been going into the law of our people. Yes, when I say the law of our people, I'm speaking to those of us who are being called Negroes today, who are indeed waking up to our true identity and are finding that we are the bloodline descendants of the people known as the 12 tribes of Yasharal. That's right. We are indeed the people referred to as Israelites within Scripture. And so I've been going into our law because as we wake up to our identity, we realize that we must also wake up to what our calling is. And so our calling, we find, is connected to a covenant that our people have established with the Most High Yahuwah himself. In fact, we find that our covenant is also tied to our law that the Most High Yahuwah gave us to live by when he gave us the honor of having his covenant. And this law is our heritage. And so when we go into this law, we are now able to see how we are to live as a people, how the law applies, and how it also impacts our journey as a people. And so in this specific segment, we're going to deal with a law known as the law of witness, or to be more specific, the law of 2 or 3 witnesses. In fact, when you go into the book of Devarim, also known as Deuteronomy, chapter 17, verse 6, you're going to see that it reads in our law that at the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall a person who is worthy of death be put to death. But at the mouth of 1 witness, that person could not be put to death. So see, our law states that we had to have at least 2 or 3 witnesses in order to carry out or execute a death sentence against a person. So this is very clearly there in our law. In fact, if you even go a couple more chapters in to Devarim chapter 19, verse 15, you're going to see there that our law also states, 1 witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin, and any sin that he sins, because at the mouth of 2 witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses shall the matter be established. So once again, to even bring up an accusation against a fellow Israelite or a fellow Yashralim, we had to actually have 2 or 3 witnesses to establish that matter. So very clearly, it's in our law that we need at least 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, it should be very clear that the reason we need at least 2 or 3 witnesses is because these are heavy matters to be established. And so we want to make sure that there is validity in the accusation that is being raised so that proper judgment is being carried out. So truth is what we are aiming for with this law of 2 or 3 witnesses. Because if you have 2 or 3 witnesses who can agree on a matter, then the likelihood of that matter being true increases. Now, we need to understand this, that this law did not just stay with Moshe or Moses, but this law was to be carried forth from generation to generation. And so this is why you also find that our Messiah, YAHUSHA HaMashiach, that's right, YAHUSHA, our Messiah, actually taught this exact same law in his ministry. In fact, when you go to the book of Matthew, chapter 18, verse 16, you're going to see there that in that passage, as Yahusha was speaking to our people and letting us know that if we had any type of issue with a fellow brother, that we should go and speak to that person one to one. Now, he said if that person would not hear us when we were trying to address whatever that grievance was or that transgression, that offense that the brother had committed, if he would not hear us, then we should take one or two more people with us so that at the mouth of two or three witnesses, every word would be established. So you see, he taught directly from the law of Moshe or Moses. And so many people often say, well, Yahusha fulfilled the law, so we no longer need to live by it. But as you can see, this clearly is not true. Yahusha taught the law just as it was given to Moshe, but he helped us to discern and understand the heavier matters of the law that we were overlooking. Now, we won't even just stop there. We'll find that after Yahusha died and resurrected, the law was also still being taught by those who were sent forth, or who were known as the apostles. In fact, we'll go directly to 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 1, where we find that the apostle known as SHA'UL or Paul, who many people say did not advocate that we follow the law of the Most High, you actually find in this passage that SHA'UL indeed does teach from the law of Moshe. In fact, he says at the beginning of chapter 13 of this epistle or this letter he wrote to the synagogue at Corinth, he says, "This is the third time I am coming to you. In the mouth of two or three witnesses shall every word be established." Now see, SHA'UL was dealing with some sin in this synagogue at Corinth. This congregation that was meeting at Corinth had some sins that were going on that he had already come and spoken to them about on different occasions. But now he was actually writing at this third occasion. And so he was addressing very clearly that matter by one, referring us back or reciting back to the law that was given to Moshe. In fact, if you go to 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 19, you're going to find that SHA'UL once again recites from that same law. In fact, he was speaking to our people or writing to our people about accusations that were coming up against the elders of our congregation. So in fact, he said, "Against an elder receive not an accusation, but before two or three witnesses." So our people were not even permitted, once again, to raise an accusation against an elder within our congregation unless we had two or three witnesses to confirm the matter. So that goes directly back to what we just read in Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15. Now, we can see very clearly that this law held import and was being used all the way up even to the time of the apostles. But I want to take it much deeper now. I want us to understand that even the Almighty Creator, Yahuwah himself, keeps this law. In fact, if you go to the book of Devarim, chapter 30, verse 19, you're going to see there that when the Almighty Creator established his covenant with our people, that he called two witnesses to establish the matter. In fact, it says in that passage, "I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life that you and your offspring may live." Now see very clearly, this matter, this covenant that the Most High established with us is life or death for our people. So there is a potential death sentence that could be carried out. So this ties actually back to Devarim chapter 17, verse 6, where very clearly, in order for us to be under this covenant, which could potentially lead to death if we broke the terms of it, the Most High wanted to make sure we had two witnesses, two faithful witnesses to deal with the matter. And in fact, he called heaven and earth as the two witnesses. Now, what better witnesses could you have? What more faithful witnesses can you have than earth and heaven in dealing with this matter. So I also want us to realize this, is that this did not just stop with establishing our covenant, but we actually find as we read scripture that the Most High Yahuwah is also going to call those same two witnesses of heaven and earth to deal with us on Judgment Day. In fact, when you get to the book of Psalms and look at Psalm chapter 50, verses 4 through 5, it reads like this. Says he, the Most High, shall call to the heavens from above and to the earth, that he may judge his people, saying, gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. Now we know clearly that we, the people being called Israelites, who are indeed the 12 tribes of Yasharal, are in a covenant by way of sacrifice with the Most High. So he is going to call us back for judgment along with those two witnesses, heaven and earth. So we need to make note of this, because this is how deep this law runs for our people and for the Most High Yahuwah himself. Okay, so with that, I want us now to consider a little deeper on how Yahusha, our Messiah, teaches the deeper truth behind the law of witnesses. In fact, in order to do that, let's go to a passage in Matthew or Matthew chapter 16, verse 19, where you see Yahusha says, and I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So we see here that the two witnesses, heaven and earth, have a correlation or a connection with one another. In fact, as you see, whatever is being bound on earth is being bound in heaven. Whatever is being loosed on earth is being loosed in heaven. So we see an agreement there. Now remember, when we're dealing with two witnesses or three witnesses, what establishes a matter or confirms a matter is the agreement between those witnesses. And so we see that heaven and earth have an agreement here. In fact, let's go a little bit deeper. You go now to Matthew chapter 18, just 2 chapters away. You'll see there that Yahusha, as he brought up that specific case where if there was a brother who trespassed against you and you go and tell him his fault between you and him alone, and if he were to listen to you or hear you, that you would then have gained your brother back, right? But if he would not hear you, then you take one or two more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he would neglect to hear those witnesses, then tell it to the congregation, meaning now you can open it up to the whole assembly of our people. But if he neglected to hear the congregation of our people, then let him be unto you as a heathen man and a publican. So see, now this is how we are to deal with our people when it comes to us trying to deal with a transgression or an offense matter. We are to deal with it directly one-to-one, but if that person does not hear us, then we open up the matter to having 1 or 2 witnesses coming with us to address the matter again. But if he will not hear us, then we will bring it to the congregation. And then if he does not hear the entire congregation, then we have to let him be dealt with as though he had nothing to do with our people. This is how the matter was to be dealt with, and this is directly from the teaching of the Messiah. Now, this is how we should be dealing with things even today. But let's go further into chapter 18, because it's funny, you're going to see the same words that were used in chapter 16 earlier on. In fact, it's like having a second witness, because Yahusha repeats the same line, shows that there's authenticity here and faithfulness to what his original word was in chapter 16. But here's what he says. Verily I say unto you, whatsoever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again I say unto you, that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. Now, very clearly in verse 19, you see there is agreement being made between two people on any matter that then would cause a response in heaven. So a matter being agreed on earth, dealing with one witness, the earth, and agreement there, now has an impact on heaven, where our Father would respond from heaven and do what was being agreed on by his people. So as you can see, this is a very, very solid correlation between the two witnesses, earth and heaven. In fact, as you get to verse 20 now, you then see Yahusha say, for where two or three are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. So see, Yahusha now is bringing the two or three law even into its spiritual context. That if we as the people of the Most High were to gather in the name of his son Yahusha, who is the way, the truth, and the life that was given to us, the embodiment of our law, because this is how he fulfilled law, was he lived it out. And not only did he live it out, but he himself is the word made manifest to us as the people of the Most High. And this is what we must be aware of. And so remember, if we're trying to get to the truth of a matter, and we are trying to do things according to the way of the Most High, then we have to subscribe directly to the law. In fact, as he said, where two or three are gathered, so we have two or three witnesses, there he is in the midst of them. That truth is right there in the midst. In fact, this deals with our law related to specifically how iron sharpens iron. Because if we have two or three of us who are actually gathered with the same cause before the Most High, we're doing things righteous before the Most High, and we're coming together in his name, then we are able to see things come into fruition. And this is important for us because this also reminds me of what was in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 12, where it says, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falls, for he hath not another to help him. Again, if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? Then it goes on to say this, and if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. You see, the wisdom of our law is also found within our Proverbs, because it's all coming from the same source, the Most High Yahuwah himself. In fact, every word that Yahusha spoke was directly a word from the Most High. And that is why he said that the words he spoke were not his own, because he was speaking on behalf of our Father who is in heaven. Now, when we talk about this connection between heaven and earth and this correlation, you also see it in the prayer that Yahusha taught us to pray, the Our Father prayer as it's come to be known, where it is said, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So see, this connection, this correlation is solid. In fact, when we think of those words related to what being binded on earth being bound in heaven, and what being loosed in earth also being loosed in heaven, we should also look at the passage in Revelation chapter 11, verses 3 through 6. In fact, it says this in verse 3. It says, and I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy. And it goes on in verse 4 to say, these are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the mighty ruler of the earth. Now let's stop there for a second. I just want to make a note here that where it says, I will give power unto my two witnesses, those two witnesses are not the heaven and earth that are being referred to here. However, the two witnesses that are being referred to here do have power over the heaven and the earth. In fact, when you get to verse 6, it says, these have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. So, as I said, these two witnesses have power over the heaven and the earth. But these two witnesses are not the heaven and earth. They are indeed the people of YAHUSHA, our people. In fact, the way you can tell this is when you go into our history as a people, you find that after the death of King Solomon, our people were split up into two separate nations. In fact, we had the southern kingdom, which was known as the kingdom, the southern kingdom, which was known as the kingdom or the house of Yahudah, I should say. And then the northern kingdom, which was known as the house of YAHUSHA or the house of Ephraim. Now, these two split nations of ours never reunified up to this point. They never came back into agreement as one nation. However, we know according to our prophecies that that is going to happen. It just has not taken place yet. And so in Revelation chapter 11, where you see that there are going to be two witnesses who will receive power from the Most High Yahuwah himself, those two witnesses are indeed the house of Judah and the house of YAHUSHA. And we have power over heaven and earth. Now let's see how we have power over heaven and earth. In fact, go back to verse 6 and see that, one, we shut the heaven. Now we need to know that the heaven is also tied to the air. So let's keep that in mind. But we also were able to smite the earth, which deals with land. So we have land, which is dealing with the earth. So let's keep that L there. The L is for land, dealing with the earth, right? Then let's take the A, which is for air, dealing with the heavens, right? But then let's also take the W for waters, because as you read verse 6, you also see that we had power over the waters to turn them to blood. So now we have LAW, which is our law. Land, air, and water is tied to our law. In fact, those very things get impacted by the actions of our people. It's written in our covenant. And if you want proof of that, go to the book of Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 17, and you're going to see that exact phrase there, tying it to our people. Now, with that, keeping this Revelation chapter 11 passage in mind, I can also show further proof that the two witnesses that are spoken about here are our people by going to the book of Yashayahu or Isaiah chapter 43, verse 10. There you're going to see that it says, the Most High Yahuwah speaking to our people. He says, you are my witnesses, saith Yahuwah, and my servant whom I have chosen, that you may know and believe me and understand that I am he. Before me there was no mighty one formed, neither shall there be after me. So see, the Most High Yahuwah called our people his witnesses. In fact, to find a second witness of that, we can just go further down a couple more verses, because Yahuwah repeats himself and says, I have declared and have saved and I have showed when there was no strange God among you. Therefore, ye are my witnesses, saith Yahuwah, that I am the mighty one. So see, the Most High Yahuwah made our people his direct witnesses. And so this is actually a great way to always establish a matter within Scripture when you read it, is you should find two passages within Scripture that are saying the same thing, either two or more. So that way you can tell if you are actually getting the truth out of that passage. So this is also the wisdom that we use when we read anything within the book the Most High gave our people, which contains his ways. All right. Now, with that, I want us now to go to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 19, because we're going to talk a little bit more about earth and heaven. In fact, it says, Yahuwah by wisdom hath founded the earth, by understanding hath he established the heavens. So we see the two witnesses of earth and heaven again, and this time they're being connected to wisdom and understanding. So we see the first witness, earth, is actually established or founded by wisdom. And then we see the second witness, the heavens, being established by understanding. So wisdom and understanding. Now, I'm going to use that principle that I just spoke about, the law of two witnesses, by looking at another place in Scripture to see how accurate this is. Now, we do have two witnesses, so the matter is being established, because when we get to the book of YAHUAH, chapter 51, verse 15, or what people know as Jeremiah, chapter 51, verse 15, it says there, He hath made the earth by his power, he hath established the world by his wisdom, and have stretched out the heaven by his understanding. So once again, we see the world or the earth established through his wisdom and his power, but then we also see the heaven established by his understanding. So yes, we have two witnesses that confirm the truth of this information, the connection between earth and heaven as two witnesses being connected to wisdom and understanding. So now that we have that, I want us to now consider something very important in our law, or attached to the truth about our law. When you go back to the book of Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 5 through 6, we read this. It says, Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahuwah, my mighty one, commanded me, that you should do so in the land whither you go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. So let's consider what this is saying here. It's saying that the statutes and the judgments, those parts of our law that were given to us as a people, are indeed our wisdom and understanding to live by. So if we do not keep this wisdom and this understanding by following the law, we then end up living foolishly. So we have to understand this, that wisdom and understanding are directly the byproducts of the law that we were given to live by. In fact, our law is infused with wisdom and understanding, and we cannot connect to wisdom and understanding without knowing and living in accordance to the law. So, another thing I want to point out about this connection between wisdom and understanding being in our law. Remember, since the earth and the heavens are established by wisdom and understanding, it only makes sense that our law would also be wisdom and understanding, because the law is meant to help us navigate through our life experience here on this earth and with our connection to the heavens. So in order to do that, the Most High gave us the very way that we can stay in tune and in harmony with him. So this is extremely deep. In fact, let's look at a proverb that also ties this together. Proverbs chapter 13, verses 14 through 16, it says, The law of the wise is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death. Now remember, our covenant is life and death, right? So this is telling you that the law we were given was to bring life to us and to help us depart from the snare or the trap of death. In fact, in verse 15, it goes on to say this, Good understanding gives favor, but the way of transgressors is hard. Now, this is good for us to note because, see, it now ties it together. It brings in now the understanding. So first we talked about the law of the wise, but now we see good understanding gives favor. Remember, if we live according to the law, we live according to the wisdom and the understanding that was put in our law, we then have favor we are able to navigate well through this life. But the way of the transgressor is hard. Now, a transgressor is a person who breaks the law. In fact, you find that in 1 John 3, verse 4. So understand that when you are transgressing the law, you are actually going against the grain of how things have been established by wisdom and understanding. So we are living foolishly when we do that. In fact, when you get to verse 16 of Proverbs chapter 13, it will confirm that. So with that all being said, let's bring it back full circle to this truth. Yahuwah Almighty is judge of our people. And therefore, we need to go by the wisdom and understanding that he has commanded us to live by. We are court ordered to live by this wisdom. And we are on probation right now. And we are being watched by two witnesses, heaven and earth, that see all things. So between the two of them, they're going to agree on a decision at the end of this walk when we get to our hearing on Judgment Day. And so we need to make sure that we are living according to the wisdom and the understanding. In fact, in Psalm 50, verse 6, just to confirm that the Most High will judge us, it says, "And the heavens shall declare his righteousness, for the mighty one is judge himself." Selah. Now, we need to understand, remember, it's going to declare his righteousness, not our own. We can't make up our own way of righteousness. We have to follow what he has declared to be righteous, which is his law that he gave us. In fact, if you need a second witness of the Most High doing his judgment, simply go down now to Psalm chapter 75, verse 7. And once again it says, "But the mighty one is the judge. He putteth down one and setteth up another." So this is how we need to conduct ourselves, understanding that the judgment of the Most High Yahuwah is righteous. His law is righteous because that's what the judge judges from, is a law. And the Most High has the standard that he gave us already to live by. So I hope this has been helpful and enlightening to you. Continue to explore scripture. I hope it really inspires you to even go deeper into understanding what is being said in the law and how it applies to our people and how it impacts our journey as a people. Shalom, shalom.